Patient. So we had some technical difficulties today, but I'm so glad that you all have been able to wait and are able to enjoy our first event in celebrating Filipinx American Heritage Month. Today we are celebrating with Jade Phoenix. We're going to go ahead and we're start with the Q&A, and then Jade will go ahead and do a poetry performance for us today. So Jade, I just wonder a little about if you could tell us like a little bit about yourself and just how you identify.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us and thanks for having me. I would say I identify as a Filipinx American. That X is important because, you know, we have recognized as trans and queer people wanting to find community amongst other Filipino in our diaspora. So the Filipinx American has kind of like bloomed out of that. So I identify as Filipinx. I am trans. I'm a trans woman. I'm queer. I am femme. And I'm also a writer, poet, storyteller, mother. Yeah, and that's some of the main stuff. But I'll share a poem that kind of fleshes all that out more.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm wondering in like your pursuit with the jobs and activities that you're currently doing, how do they relate to the goals that you have and you ultimately want to achieve?
Yeah, well, I love that the work I get to do is, you know, I usually aim towards people that are in similar communities as me, people that share similar identities. And that's just kind of how I'm able to organize the work I do is how can I commune and share my work with other Filipinx Americans, with other queer folks, with other trans people, with other parents. And so it is very much like wanting to find people that are in similar spaces as me, creating and envisioning the same world as I am, and then getting to kind of just commune with them and share my story with them and hope that it's uplifting. So
thank you. What's one thing you wish people knew about the communities you identify with?
I think I'm always working on sharing about our struggles, just what it means to, you know, like live in a white supremacist culture, a patriarchal culture, transphobic culture, and what struggles come out of, you know, just like being the people that we are and the communities that we are. And so I'm always, you know, I use my poetry and my storytelling to highlight, well, what are the ways that the system we all participate in doesn't help us or is against us? And maybe people that don't share those identities are going to be a little not going to see how clearly, you know, these things affect us. And so I'm often just using my storytelling and my lived experience to bring awareness to the struggles and oppression that we face.
Yeah, and breaking down those barriers that white supremacy really does set up for us to harm us too.
Yes,
so that's great.
And capitalism, yes.
So many isms out there that really do impact. So that's great. And so lastly, what's one piece of advice that you would give to others who want to pursue a similar path to yours, especially those that identify as Filipinx, as trans, or within the artistic community like yourself?
Yeah, I love that. My main thing is if you're an artist or someone that's like trying to connect with your identities and your communities in this way, I used to think like if I make art, I want to make it as broad as possible so that I could reach as many people. And I actually find that that might not even be the best way. I'm actually realizing like try to be as niche as possible, right? Like speak directly to your people. And there's enough of us out there. You know, it might not feel like there is, but with the social media age and digital age, it's like tell your story to the people that you want it to be heard and find a way to get it out there. And so instead of trying to like appeal to everyone, it's more of like appeal to your people, the people you want to appeal to, like that your community, and that's what's going to uplift your art and your work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jade. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jade for her to do her poetry performance.
Cool. Yes, thanks everyone for being here and spending your afternoon with me. Just want to share some of my work and my poetry and hope that it speaks to you in whatever ways you need it right now. Hi, my name is Jade Phoenix, like the crystal and the mythical creature engulfed in flames. Yes, I do bring good luck and serenity, and yes, I do burn shit down in order for it to experience rebirth. Would you expect anything less from a Scorpio sun, moon, and rising? With Scorpio and Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury too? I call myself the Scorpio queen, wouldn't you? I am a trans woman, which means I was assigned a gender at birth of which I never consented to, And now I have 2 puberty phases to unpack with my therapist. Yay. I'm a first generation Filipina, which means I can't speak Tagalog because my parents subconsciously wanted us to assimilate to whiteness. Sometimes I call myself a witch because I write poems and recite them as incantations until they come to pass. Other times I call myself a bitch because I will stare back at a motherfucker that gazes too long. Most times I call myself a mother because 3 times a day I have a hungry daughter I need to feed. And I guess that also makes me someone's personal chef without the getting paid part. In hard times when I'm in my shadows, I call myself unworthy of love. Raised as a pastor's kid in an evangelical home, being taught I had to be born again to get to heaven, since being born the first time was a sin. When I fear my authentic expression, instead of trying something new because I'm too afraid to fail, I call myself a perfectionist and move on. At my lowest, I call myself a failure. When my parents raised me, they failed to tell me otherwise, so as you can see, my inner child was left to fend for herself. Now I am learning to see myself as whole and healing. In times of alignment, when I step into my light, I call myself exactly who I need to be in this moment. I think of myself as the cursed breaker. When generations before me were riddled with unresolved traumas passed on from parent to child, I am deciding that the buck stops here, and I'm gonna do my best not to pass them on to the generations behind me. I'm Jade Phoenix, Scorpio Queen, grateful steward on Tongva land, gender binary destroyer, imperfect perfectionist, and breaker of generational curses, the first of her name. Sorry, I've been into the Game of Thrones. I don't know if anyone else is watching that, but how they introduce people like with all of those things about their name, that's like what I was going for at the end. And so I was like kind of feeling that. So that's just how I want to introduce myself now. I just want someone to come in and yell all my titles before I enter a room.
I should have done that.
Yes, that's how I'm taking notes now. So that's how I'm entering every room from here on out. Yes, so that's just intro about me. But also, yeah, as you know, we've noted, I do create from a space of my identities. And so since this is Filipinx American History Month, I will share a piece about that. I don't know if any of you are first gen Americans, so parents, children to immigrants. I think there's a very, common denominator there as well, beyond where you come from, but there is very much like we all come here, our parents brought us here to give us a better life. And how does that look like as we're growing up and being like, oh, I don't know if this is a better life, but I get what you're going for. So this poem kind of reaches on that. 1, I wish I could recite this poem in Tagalog. 2, I can only refer to the language of my ancestors and metaphors written with the colonizers' English. How growing up, I considered Tagalog to be a bright neon stain on my parents' camouflage tongue, or its accent landing on my English akin to a stench of odor needing to be covered up. 3, I'm an American-born child of the 80s in Los Angeles, California, born to Filipino immigrants with 2 kids already in tow. I came along 5 years in on their assimilation train, their first American-born offspring. 4, I was never raised to speak our native tongue. I was never taught to have pride in our customs or history. In our home, my family mostly spoke Taglish, and over the course of my childhood, learned to say only the most basic phrases like mahal kita, I love you, or salamat po, thank you, or putangin mo, which is the equivalent of fuck you, but literally translates to your mother is a whore. Eventually, I picked up on casual questions around the house like, anong ginagawa mo? What are you doing? Or saan ka pupunta? Where are you going? Or bakla ka ba? Are you gay? These phrases, the abandoned fruits I managed to scavenge along the forgotten fields of my parents' colonized tongues. 5, when I was a teenager, I used to call myself a coconut with pride. You see, I figured I had rough brown skin on the outside, but cracked me open to find all the gooey whiteness on the inside. 6, these are sentiments of a past I am no longer proud of, thoughts I have been too afraid to admit to myself for fear of seeing my severed roots removed from its native soil, planted in a field my parents were promised to be greener pastures for us to grow, in this orchard of land they call free and the home of the brave, where the trees that are considered most beautiful look nothing like us, and the fruit of the fields considered most desirable never fell from our branches. 7, when I was little, my Lolo used to tell me, boy, no matter what they say, always be proud of who you are. And not a day goes by when I don't wonder if he were still alive to see all the woman I have become, would he still be proud of me? Or would the word bakla roll off his tongue in slander the same way it does from parents, from my titos and titas, from my cuyas and ates? All of our relations are so painfully preceded by gender. 8, Did you know that the Tagalog language has no translation for the gender pronouns he or she? Because of this, as a result, growing up was most likely amounted to being lost in translation. I was referred to as she on and off ever since I was born. 9. Maybe someday I will translate this poem into Tagalog. Maybe someday my family will get my gender pronouns correct on purpose. Maybe someday I'll see my Lolo again and I will get to find out if he is proud of me and all of this brown skin and all of the woman his grandson has become. And my Lolo's words continue to echo in my existence. Anak, no matter what they say, always be proud of who you are. I want to tell him that I am. 10. Did you know that the coconut is the deadliest fruit? It can kill someone simply by falling from the tree and striking the colonizer on the head. Thank you, thank you. Love the laugh emoji. All right, thank you. Yeah, so that, kind of the perspective of a first-gen Filipino, right, or first-gen immigrant. A lot of us feel that pressure from parents, got to assimilate to whiteness. And so, yeah, I think of my art and my storytelling as also a way of healing. So getting to tell this story, kind of connecting to my past, understanding my present, all a part of the healing process. And I think that's the power of poetry, the power of telling your story, the power of, speaking it out loud and it being witnessed. And so that's something I really encourage folks if, you're going into some kind of, performance art or any kind of, even just telling your own story, even if you're not an artist, even if you just want to write your story and tell it to someone, there's a lot of healing power in that. And so I think of myself as I'm a poet because I'm also doing my own healing. And so as a trans person, it looks like this. This is a poem where people always talk about, oh, how did you know you were trans? Or when did you know you were trans? And I don't really know how to answer that, so I wrote this poem instead. Growing up, it never really occurred to me that I wasn't supposed to be a boy, nor did it feel like I was born in the wrong body. In fact, most of my adolescence, I remember enjoying the mischief of boyhood. So when asked for the origin of my trans identity, I have no clear answer in response, no eureka moment to speak of, no genesis to my transition. When pressed for an answer, the best I can do is cite how poorly I grew into my masculinity, how the seams of my boyhood quickly began to unravel in my process of becoming a man, how eventually I started to outgrow its limits, how I started feeling trapped in its lack of vulnerability. I slowly began to notice how masculinity no longer fit my body right. The way it was so fragile, but needed to be worn as if it were unbreakable. So I began searching for something else to wear altogether, something maybe less fragile or not so afraid to be broken. You see, it didn't happen suddenly. I didn't wake up one morning to find the skin of my masculinity shed away overnight. Rather, I think of my transition as something more fluid or less defined. I like to think of my femme expression as little seeds planted near the roots of my fullest potential, free from the weeds of toxic masculinity assigned to me at birth. I like to think of these femme seeds scattered throughout my garden, rising to the surface my whole life, while shedding the skin of my boyhood became compost meant to prepare the soil for the spring. I like to think of myself as flowering, a beautiful collection of petals peeling its way open ever so slowly, each reveal much more beautiful than the last. I've come to discover myself as a resplendent garden, finally seeing its beauty nearing full bloom, and how foolish of me it would be not to spend the rest of my life tending to its care. Thank you. All right, this next piece, I think it relates a little bit to your question about, what I want people to know about my communities, how I answered about kind of like bringing attention to the things we are going through. And so this piece very much is about transphobia and how rampant it is in our world and is still something, and kind of sharing the effects on us and how, just giving people a little bit of, understanding of it and perspective. And hopefully that this poem and this storytelling is able to bring people to change or change their hearts. And so that's why I wrote this piece. Trigger warning for murder, suicide, and transphobia. Seems to me these days, my social media timelines have been filled with the very same triggers. I don't need to keep reading past them to know that the article in question is probably another news report detailing the deaths of another trans woman of color, another article full of misgendering and dead naming. Instead of properly learning how to name the dead, I don't need to keep reading name after name after name to know that here in America in 2022, there have been 57 trans people murdered at a rate that not even this poem can keep up with. I have to edit the number in this line every time I recite this because transphobia kills. This is not a metaphor, it's a fact. While majority of people never stop to think how they might be complicit in our deaths, guess what? Your transphobia does not get to be a cute, harmless pet belief you can keep safe inside your cage of bathroom bills and religion. It isn't some personal morality you get to take with you to legislation or pass on to your children like some cheap inheritance. We're not just a personal preference where you get to write us off as simply not your cup of tea, because in reality, your transphobia kills. In America, we're the highest targeted demographic of hate crimes. In America, we are the least housed while simultaneously being the most underemployed. On television shows, we end up as dead sex workers on CSI crime shows or punchlines for men's laughter. In the justice system, Black trans women are often incarcerated or criminalized when defending themselves against their attacker. This is a crime the system deems punishable by years in a men's facility. They call that manslaughter. No coincidence that the word manslaughter and man's laughter is spelled exactly the same way. You see, transphobia is the subtle perpetrator no one wants to talk about. The monster very few are willing to rise up to. The terror no army is enlisted to fight against. Transphobia is more dangerous than you think. It is more fatal than you believe. It is more than you are able to contain when it goes unchecked in this world. So this is a trigger warning. Do not let your complicity become the silencer covering the barrel of the gun. Do not let your hate fill the clip with bullets meant to bury into my chest. Do not let your fear be the trigger pulling back the, do not let your fear be the finger pulling back the trigger or my body on the other side of your hand holding the smoking gun. This is a trigger warning. Transphobia kills. This is a warning trigger. Kill your transphobia before I or someone I love becomes the one that kills next. Thank you. All right, got about 5, 10. Okay, so I'll share one more piece. If anyone has any more questions, anyone in the room has any questions, I would love to I'll spend a little time to answer anything that you might have, or if there's anything you want to share with me, want me to know. I do appreciate you all for being here. I appreciate you all for sticking around and listening to my work. If anything resonated with you or you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram under @JadePhoenix_, or any of other social medias. Just Google me, Jade Phoenix Martinez, you'll find me. I got a website, I got website with some of my films that I've made and other things. I'd love to connect, love to meet you if you resonated with anything that I've shared. Again, I appreciate you all for being here. So I'm gonna share this last piece with you all. Again, if you have anything you wanna share after this, let's chat. It seems with the rise of technology, smartphones, and social media, we are connected to each other now more than any other time in human history. Yet somehow in truth, it feels like we've never been more alone. When the cost of living rises while our wages stay the same, we gotta work harder just to stay afloat. I barely have time for myself, much less my family and friends. When the system is stacked against us in favor of white supremacy, we see our own city council working against us in other communities of color, and the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. All while we've had to navigate a public health crisis never before seen in our lifetimes. I wouldn't blame you for wanting to go home and hide away. To just stay home and feel a sense of safety and control amidst the chaos, just to make it to the next day. I'm here to tell you that it's okay. I've been there, I am there. It's been too long since I've hugged a friend or exchanged knowing smiles with a stranger, all while the rooms in my home have become a cocoon of mixed parts broken and other parts healing. I'm not ever really sure what day it is anymore, so when I say that I miss you, it doesn't feel like a platitude or hyperbole, it feels honest. Like the way summers in elementary school would get a little too long. When I started to miss my friends, I really miss my friends. I miss bearing my soul in a room full of familiar strangers. I miss feeling alone in a room full of the most familiar strangers. It has never felt more like breath to me now. Now that I've forgotten what it means to be witnessed in the weightlessness of these words being lifted out of my chest, it's like breathing in the freshest spring air after the rain washes it clean. You see, there's only so much I can know of myself from a mirror. There's so much more I want to discover in the reflections of those that I love. those I have yet to meet, those of whom I might never share more than just this passing glance. But if you think about those odds, the two of us out of billions and billions of people crossing paths in this singular moment of time across a bridge of infinite space, how defiantly odd this precious life is. We are shooting stars orbiting each other in the night sky. We are a momentary fusion of lights when our hearts collide. That's why I know we will find our way to each other again soon. I know we will create anew the constellations we have forged for us to shine at our brightest. And I have hope for the clouds of our grief to be washed clean as we call forth the sunshine of our smiles to dry out the rain. I have hope for better days, for warm smiles and that friendly embrace. And though I have no clue when life will return to normal or if there's even normal to return to anymore, I do know this for sure. I'm ready to bloom out of this cocoon, and I'm pretty damn sure that you are too. So until then, if I'm being honest, I'll probably still miss you. That's all I got. Again, I appreciate you all for sticking around, for being here, for spending time with us, for giving me the opportunity to share my story. Would love to stay connected in any way. Would love to come back and be a part of this with you all in any other way in the future. So
Thank you so much, Jade. So we have the Jade's website up on the chat as well. And then we also have her Instagram available for you all to be able to share and learn more about Jade too, and also the films too. She has documentaries that she has created herself as well. So I highly recommend you all check it out, and maybe we're hopeful to eventually invite Jade for next year for APA.
Yes,
And show her documentary as well as inviting your daughter to.
yes.
So that we could share in that experience together.
Yes.
So I'm wondering,
I
do see a question here. So what are you currently working on?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm working on a short film actually right now. I have wrote a short film basically about my life, a little bit more about my familial. It's not really gonna be a biopic. It's like just a short story that is like loosely based off of me, but I, grew up with a brother that bullied me my whole life. And so kind of like telling that story a little bit about, being bullied in the family, being queer and trans. So I'm excited about that. I got my first draft done, and now I'm starting to finalize it and start pitching it to other people to help make it. And then also, working on another book. I'm working on a poetry book. So I want to be able to tour that. And again, like I was sharing with y'all earlier, trying to like rebrand and build a bigger, audience. And I think having an official book of poetry and getting it published and touring, I think that's what's going to help kind of take it to the next level. So
Amazing.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments out there for Jade? I do see a few comments. Beautiful poetry.
Yes,
thank you for sharing.
For
Manslaughter versus man's laughter, chilling.
Yeah, that lyric just kind of came to me. I was like, ooh, that's kind of like that.
Yeah.
But it also hits you where where it's supposed to. So.
Thank you. Yeah, Scorpio season is here.
Where my fellow Scorpios at?
Yes.
Yes. No, I am all about it. I'm actually like throwing a big party my birthday. I'm turning 40 this year, so so it's gonna be. If you do follow me on any of my socials, you'll see. I'm throwing a big femme salon. It's gonna be a performance space, so you'll see a little bit of this. But it'll also be a dance party after. It'll be in downtown LA. It's an arts district.
Oh, so beautiful. Yeah.
I'm putting all the stuff out today. I was waiting for Scorpio season to turn, and now I'm like, all right.
It's time.
Yeah, so it's called a Femme Salon Scorpio Supremacy. So
definitely will check it out. Amazing. Awesome. Why I went to see the Amazing. Well, you never know. Maybe to get them to play someone in your film. Who knows? Carrie is wondering, is it challenging to write personal stories? Like, do you get nervous sharing intimate details through art?
It's challenging for sure. Thank you for that question. But I think the challenge of being vulnerable, and that is hard, but it also is the power. It also is the strength, and it also is what heals. So yes, like the pieces I write, the short film I wrote, I've cried writing this for, hours. I put literal blood, sweat, and tears on it. It's hard. It's challenging. There's no way around that, especially when you're dealing with marginalized identities, identities that have suffered through trauma and pain. And yes, it's hard. It's challenging, but I think that that's the beauty of it. I think that that's why that's why I'm drawn to it, is because it's a way for me to take back my story. It's a way to take back my voice. And when I tell my story, I experience healing. And so, yes, with anything that's hard, there's also the payoff, right? There's also, well, this is why I'm doing such hard things.
Yeah, it's interesting how art is just really allows like a catharsis. Like it's a very cathartic experience, and it's really like creates very beautiful like your pieces. Like it's just incredible how it can create it. Madison's wondering, how do you stay motivated to continue writing?
Yeah, there's a few things. Again, like I said, like my healing process, telling my story, capitalism, unfortunately, bills, rent. And I'm not trying to do a 9 to 5, like I've kind of committed at this point to like, I'm a storyteller, I'm an artist. And the 9 to 5 just does not sit well with my spirit, with my heart, and with what I know is like how I want to live. And so I've had to be creative about how am I going to pay bills? I got a daughter. How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to feed her? How am I going to, and so essentially it's like, I know that some of the gifts I've been giving, the way I've found my own healing process has been through writing, has been through telling my story. So I just got to keep at it. It's not easy. It's not, every day I'm excited about it, but I'm learning and I'm going through it, that the motivation really is like, I want to continue to be able to thrive, continue to heal, and continue to know myself and know my communities. So.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like it's like a reaffirming of yourself every time you're able to write, but also like new pieces that you're discovering about yourself, especially like maybe through trauma. Or we talked about like therapy and how like that can really help reveal things that maybe like we didn't.
And that is motivation, right? Because it's like, oh, why do I keep running against these things that are hard, right? I have goals, aspirations, dreams, and I keep running up against like these problems and these things, and it's like, oh, maybe that is some things I've got to overcome, some personal things. So therapy helps, but then in that, like I was saying, my writing process is part of my therapy, and I've been doing workshops recently about how to like reconnect with your inner child, and that's the kind of writing that has really like broken out for me. It was like, oh, and I also with the people I'm doing like these workshops with, is that they're finding that the writing process of talking to your inner child, or maybe writing from the inner child perspective, really starts to illuminate and put light on the things that you've gone through, trauma that you might not have been able to, connect to until now. And so the writing process is very motivating in that this is how I heal, this is how I make a living, this is how I connect with my audiences. So it's kind of just, like the motivation is built into like just what I want for my life. So.
You. Hazel has her hand. Yeah, go ahead, Hazel.
Hi, so I'm off camera today. Hi, Jade. My name is Hazel. I'm part of the planning team actually for FAH month celebration. So I wanted to just applaud you for your courage, for staying true to your authentic self. The pressures faced by, queer, trans, all over is tremendous. And I think the more that we see and hear from representatives from your community helps normalize, right? It's like a lot of marginalized groups. I see so many representation of different ethnic groups in a lot of shows now. And I'm also seeing trans folks being represented in the show. So it's nice to see that, but I know there's still a lot of work ahead. But I just really, applaud you for your courage, because it takes a lot of strength to put yourself out there and to be vulnerable. And also too, in terms of pursuing your career in the arts, right? I know that in Filipino American community, there is a pressure to pursue that very conventional career to take care of your family, right? In the 9 to 5 gig. And we actually like to highlight. Sorry.
Or be a nurse.
I didn't want to say that, but right, pursuing something in the healthcare field, right? We've actually done events in the past, specifically highlighting Filipinos in non-traditional, non-healthcare fields. So like, because that's the stereotype. And we brought in artists, actually writers, who have published, Filipino American writers, just to showcase that, right, because folks do, subscribe to that stereotype, like, oh, you're Filipino American, so you must be a nurse. Like,
Right.
no, we exist in other realms as well. So, to pursue that, career, non-traditional career, it takes, a lot of courage. So you're sort of tackling two very difficult, right, challenges, embracing your true self as a queer trans, and at the same time pursuing a non-traditional, conventional career that takes. I mean, I couldn't do that. I got stuck in. I mean, I'm in education, but that pressure to follow something conventional is very, very powerful. But I applaud you, and it's wonderful to hear your story. And thank you for being here. It's really, really refreshing. So
Yeah.
it's great to meet you.
Yes. Thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you so much, Hazel.
Yeah.
Of course.
It does feel a lot like, how can I like make my life on hard mode in a video game? Just like, let's just go ahead and put this on hard mode. Like challenge, like, yes, pursuing a thing that's like outside of the norm as like a personal, as an artist, and all the things that, yeah, I've had to struggle with. But also it's like, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way, right? Also, it's just kind of part of who I am and the work that I'm doing. And I think also the Scorpio part of me is just like, I can't help but be authentic, and like I'm just going to like chase down like what feels realist to me, because that's just part of my makeup. And yeah, you're right also about, also what motivates me is like being able to show this to people, right? Like I didn't get like trans, queer, Filipino representation in the media at all. Like I grew up and none of that showed me that like I was someone that was, worthy of being loved or worthy of being praised or being seen. And so my hope is that as I'm making these films, as I'm telling my poetry, as I'm making these appearances, like for other young queer and trans Filipinx folks, that they're actually getting representation and they're actually getting, oh, I can do that too. And giving them hope for something that they don't have to fit into the norms of what doesn't fit them. And that the more and more of us can continue to blaze trails of like authenticity and being true to like who we are and who we want to be.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for Jade for being here today. I really appreciate it, and for you all being here. Please check out our other cultural diversity events that we'll be having throughout the month, and check out Jade's website. Follow her on Instagram. Ask her any questions. Yes, the true Scorpio queen. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Jade. Yay. Thank you so much, y'all. Have a good one. Don't forget to sign in.